Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we are going to be previewing the NBA Finals between the Boston Celtics and Dallas Mavericks. Of course, it doesn't tip off until Thursday and we will have a couple more shows before then. But today is when we're going to really dig into the nitty gritty of all the specific matchups, all the key dynamics that we expect to decide this series. So Logan, I want to start with Luka Doncic because he is coming off of just a remarkable performance in the Western Conference Finals, and we would both agree is clearly the best player on either of these teams. How do you expect him to fare in this matchup, and how do you expect Boston to try to deal with the Luka problem?
Carson, I think Luka's going to eat in this series. He is joining some special company with what he's doing in this playoff run. He's one of three players to average 28 points, 9 boards, and 8 assists in a playoff run. That's 2015 and 2018 LeBron and 2023 Jokic. Those are the only two players to ever average that stat line across an entire playoff run. And I do wonder who he's matched up with. I wonder if Boston will implement just switching everything on Luka. I think eventually they put Tatum on Luka. I just think that's the best physical matchup for him. And I think there are things you can do to attempt to slow down Luka. I think you play him really physically. I think you apply intense ball pressure. I think you mix in surprise doubles. I think you mix in traps and blitzes. And I think you try your best to attack Luka on defense to tire him out throughout this series. But I really don't think it matters, man. The level that Luka's at, I just trust him to get to his spots effortlessly versus one defender or out of pick and roll. I just think he's too strong. I think he's too physical. I think he can dictate and back everybody that Boston puts on him down. I think he can get to all his spots, if that's floater range, if those are layups around the basket, if they're step-back threes, step-back mid-range jumpers. The difference to me is what level is he going to be on these shots. Overall in these playoffs, he's shooting 36% on pull-up and step-back J's. 36% on pull-up and step-back threes and 34% overall. But in this last series versus the Timberwolves, he shot 53% on step-back jumpers and threes and 43% from deep. He shredded the best defense in basketball. If he's going to be at that level, I don't really know what you do with that, man. They're just unstoppable looks that he can get to effortlessly. I mean, think about in Game 5. He is spraying 30-foot threes off rip. This Celtics defense is great. I think they have a collection of some of the best perimeter defense, defenders in basketball. I think this is the best defensive backcourt you could create. They have got great personnel, but I think Luka Doncic is an unsolvable problem. I do think he's far and away the best player in this series, and I trust him to generate effortless offense against anyone, man. And then you add in what his supporting cast is doing. Derek Lively and him have combined for the most alley-oops this season. That's a tough weapon to stop if you're Boston's defense. Derek Jones Jr. during this playoff run has made 50% of his threes off of Luka passes. It's just hard for me to envision Boston really disrupting Luka to any level, man, with this level that he's been at. I really do just trust him to consistently create easy offense for Dallas every single game in this series.
Luka is one of those special offensive players who is going to ball out no matter what. Also, that exclusive club that you mentioned, I do think Oscar Robertson is in there as well, because when I heard that list, I thought Big O's got to be in there, and I checked, and it looks like he is. But special company, of course, and it's a testament to the level of scorer and playmaker that he is at that size. That's really rare in the scope of NBA history. But given that he is obviously going to play at an incredibly high level offensively no matter what, Boston does match up really well. Jaylen Brown is going to be on him. I'm pretty confident about that. And he's a pretty damn good Luka defender. He has the height, he has the length, and crucially, he has the strength, which is something that Jaden McDaniels was lacking in last matchup, but Lou Dort for OKC had, and that made him a significantly better counter to Luka just because he was able to kind of throw around Jaden like a ragdoll. He is so ridiculously strong. And Jaylen has had a really, really good defensive season. He's been more committed to that end of the floor than ever this year. So I do think he matches up better than Jaden McDaniels, better than Ant for Minnesota. But defending Luka is obviously much more than a one-on-one endeavor. So in terms of how Boston will approach this as a team defense, you talk about them putting Tatum on Luka. I don't think that they'll ever do that. I expect them to put Tatum on the big because that's what they did in the regular season, and then to put Kristaps Porzingis on either PJ Washington or Derrick Jones Jr., probably PJ, because then you have a better physical counter to PJ on the glass with KP. Derrick Jones Jr. has actually been more effective as a roller, but either way, KP will be on one of those two wings. Also, PJ can do some more mismatch attacking if you match up a smaller player with him. And that allows them to switch every action with the big screening because it's Jayson Tatum who's on Derek Lively. And so you just confidently switch that. And now you have Brown on Lively. Lively's not going to attack a mismatch there, neither is Gafford. And Tatum is an excellent option to guard Luka. Like Logan, I don't disagree that he is probably the best pure defensive option to throw at Luka. I just think that you gain the most from being able to effectively neutralize the advantage that those screens create, take away those lobs to Lively and Gafford that were so devastating in this past series. And then when they do call up KP's man for a screen, which they still did a good bit in their last regular season matchup, he can play Luka in a higher drop, which is where he's most comfortable in a drop coverage. But against Luka, you don't want to just let him sort of comfortably work his way into the lane. That's where he's so lethal. But KP can play that higher drop because you're not worried about the lob threat. You're not nearly as worried about the roller getting behind you when it's PJ Washington as you are when it's Lively or Gafford. So that's a pretty damn good answer to Luka pick and roll. As you say, Luka's shot making can be so absurd that you may just get cooked no matter what. That's the reality with these all-time great offensive players. Sometimes great offense just overwhelms great defense no matter what. But what that should do is mostly take away his ability to get into the paint, to feed the bigs in the paint, and force him into at least that tougher shot making. It also allows KP to play that roamer role as an awesome rim protector. That is where his value is overwhelming defensively. It's his ability to protect the rim, and having him on PJ Washington or Derrick Jones Jr. allows him to be involved as a backline defender no matter what is going on. Both guards also match up with Luka pretty damn well. They are conceding height, of course. They're both just 6'4", but that's big for a guard. And they have the strength and they have the instincts to hold up in that matchup, especially Drew. So I don't expect that to ever be the primary matchup for Luka, but just when you think about cross matches in transition, right? Him trying to hunt mismatches with guard-on-guard screens, like that will never be harder for Luka than it is against Boston. They just do not have a weak point. So I fully expect him to be the best player on the floor, especially offensively. And that will always be a huge advantage for Dallas. It was one of the defining aspects of last series, just how soundly he outplayed Anthony Edwards, knowing that he can explode for 35, 10, and 10 efficiently in a game, potentially in a series, that he can just rip your heart out individually in a way that clearly no Celtic can, but very, very few players in the game can, period. But unless he does shoot 43% from deep and is ridiculous from mid-range, like last series when nobody can do anything with Luka Doncic, I do think that this defense is really well built to guard him and at least take away the easy stuff.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. That's all you can do with a legendary offensive juggernaut like Luka Doncic is try to disrupt him. I do want to throw out some other numbers from Luka in these playoffs. He's shooting 87% in the restricted area. He's shooting 51% overall from the mid-range. He's shooting 46% on pull-up jumpers overall and 44% on step-backs. Like, he is just absurd. And if he is at that level, it's going to be really hard to disrupt. I'm glad you bring up Tatum because I think Tatum has the most responsibility of anybody on this defense for a few reasons. One, the problem with putting Tatum on Luka, another little ripple effect that you would have is you're taking Tatum away from the basket if he's defending Luka pull-up jumpers. And I think that's a big deal too. You know, Tatum is responsible for finishing and ending a lot of possessions. And if they're going with Tatum at the 4 spot and KP at the 5, which is what I expect them to do for the majority of, lineups and for the majority of the game, Tatum also is, one of the best deterrents, as you mentioned, for those backdoor lobs and for alley-oops and disrupting stuff on the backside. So I think it's interesting what they do there. And the only reason I suggest Tatum going on Luka is I just wonder if he ends up bullying those other guys. And they're great. Like you said, Luka's going to have his hands full more so than any other team. But I don't really know if it matters. Like, I think he has a significant strength advantage against Drew and against Derek White. And
against Jaylen, though, because Jaylen's going to be the primary matchup. And Jaylen is a strong big wing.
Yeah, I just wonder if you've got to inevitably switch that, if he's getting cooked. I don't know. That's something that we'll have to see throughout the series. I just wonder if that's an adjustment that Boston's going to want to make because Tatum is by far their best perimeter defender and option to throw at him consistently. But it's going to be on this collective, man. It's really hard to figure out. I don't know if there's a good answer. Like you said, man, you try your best. You try to throw him off. You make him work for every single shot. And you kind of cross your fingers, man. There's also going to be a big burden on Kyrie Irving as well, man. And that's another guy that's also going to have to produce offensively. And I worry more about Kyrie in this matchup than I really do about Luka. Kyrie's going to have some easy opportunities for him with all the attention that Luka's going to draw. But again, Kyrie doesn't have these same physical advantages that Luka is going to have against these other guards. He is also going up against two really big, strong guards in Drew Holiday and Derek White. On those switches, Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum are very capable of switching out. And you can't overstate how important Kyrie Irving has been to Dallas alongside Luka. Carson, he has the biggest point differential on court versus off court of any player in the playoff field. Like, the Dallas offense goes from by far the best in the field to one of the worst in the playoff field with Kyrie on and off the court. And so I think it's important that he gets going in every single game as well, man. Like, obviously, you know, your two best offensive players have to show up, but I'm a little more worried about this matchup for Kyrie than Luka. Like, Luka has these, you know, unchangeable things that he is, again, he's just going to get to the step back threes with his change of pace. He is going to work with his strength. I worry a little bit Kyrie, like he's going to have to put on a special shot-making display every night. It's just going to be a lot harder on him going up against this personnel than any team that Dallas has faced in these, in this playoff run.
For sure, this is the best defensive backcourt in the league, and I do think that Drew will be the primary assignment for Kyrie, but Derek White is also obviously a great option, and as they can switch 1 through 4 confidently with Luka, they can do the same with Kyrie. Tatum and Brown are also excellent options to guard Kyrie. Now, Kyrie does have a quickness advantage with basically all of these guys, but when you're talking about White and Holiday, who will be the primary options, they're awesome point of attack defenders. Like, these are all defense caliber guys, and they can play him very physically, and they have the size, and they have the hands, they have the length to still be a really difficult matchup. And then, if he does beat you off the bounce, you have an elite rim protector in KP as that backline defender, and then it becomes a question of testing Kyrie as a finisher, where he's obviously incredibly all-time skilled, but it's just difficult with his size against a guy as massive as KP, or you force them to make those kick-out passes and you see if those Dallas shooters can beat you. So the guy's unreal. He may just cook you no matter what. It's the same thing as Luka, right? Shot making is the one thing that you can never take away, and that's what Minnesota got a good old-fashioned helping of last series. It didn't matter how well they played defensively. Kyrie and Luka were just on another planet as jump shooters and as difficult shot makers. But I do think that Boston matches up really well with Kyrie as well, and I do think they should be able to force him into a tougher shot diet, which is always a win. And with Luka, like, he was so unconscious last series. He was also ice cold as a jump shooter in the first round and a half. So to me, if there is a way to play him, it is just to do everything you can to keep him out of that painted area. And I think that Boston does match up quite well with both of these Dallas guards. They're unbelievable offensive players, so this is all relative. I don't want anybody to try to make this sound like we're saying, oh my God, Boston's going to shut down Dallas's guards, because nobody on the planet is going to do that. But I do think that they match up well. I also think Dallas's offensive supporting cast is going to be a very interesting unit to watch in this series. I think this has to be a big PJ Washington series because of the fact that I expect him to be matched up with KP. And so Dallas is going to try to involve KP in a number of these actions just because they want to have the advantages of making a big guard in space against Luka Doncic and Kyrie as well. So PJ has to hit his pick and pop threes because that's something that he wasn't really able to do last series, and that is going to be the go-to action. I expect them to use him more as a popper than a roller when they're using him as a screener. He also has to hit his corner threes if KP is going to roam off of him, and PJ has been very volatile there. He was 31% from deep in the first round. Then he was 47% from deep against OKC. Then he was 25% from deep against Minnesota. We know that he's always going to take those shots. He does not lose his confidence, but I do think that the consistency is going to be a question, and he has to make those. And he's not really going to have opportunities to mismatch attack, especially if he has that KP matchup. But just up and down the roster, like, I wouldn't want Derek White on him full time. I'd rather have Derek White on Derek Jones Jr. because PJ does have a clear size advantage there, but it's not like PJ post-ups against Derek White are really where I want my offense to be directed if I'm Dallas. Like, he's still a really stout guard defender. So, big PJ series, not going to be the easiest matchup, but I do think he will have a good amount of opportunities, more than any other Dallas supporting cast member here, because I think it's going to be tougher on the bigs in this series. They were amazing last series on both sides of the ball, but offensively, averaged 20 points per game combined on 83% from the field. And it kind of was the reality, regardless of the coverage, that if Minnesota played some of those more aggressive looks, playing the big up at the level, blitzing, well, then Luka was just going to manipulate the low man and create great looks for his bigs around the rim. Or when Rudy was in a drop or a higher drop, like, they were able to spoon feed the bigs over the top with those lobs. I just think because of the fact that Boston is going to be comfortable guarding either one of them with Tatum, which makes them so switchable, they're just not going to have advantages created for them like that. And they're not going to be able to punish switches. They're just not that skilled. So this entire Dallas supporting cast, I love defensively, and offensively, they've played well, but it is still a limited supporting cast. It's very, very different from Boston's, where these dudes have super multifaceted skill sets for the Celtics. You have multiple great shooters. You have a dominant post-up player. You have multiple really good ball handlers. When you're talking about the 3rd through 5th options, for Dallas, it's basically, okay, yeah, we have really athletic bigs, but they need great looks created for them. PJ, if you leave him wide open in the corner, he may make a high percentage of those threes. He just as well may not. Derrick Jones Jr. has shot quite well in these playoffs, but we know that that's inconsistent with him as well. And sometimes he might not be comfortable taking those open looks consistently. So I think Boston's ability to switch with such great options is just going to limit that easy offense created for the supporting cast as a whole, because you're neutralizing the advantages. You are staying out of rotation as much defensively. And so I do think it's going to be a harder series offensively for Dallas' supporting cast than most of what we've seen over these last couple rounds.
Yeah, and you're 1,000% right. Like, Boston has a clear offensive skill and shooting advantage throughout their roster, and that is something that I'm concerned with. Like, in their last matchup, they met one time post-trade deadline with the final iteration of Dallas's roster, and Boston outshot Dallas by 36 from the three-point line. Like, that could be a big swing thing in individual games. Dallas's shooters don't hit anything, and guess what? Boston is canning every three-pointer that they take. And while I've been very critical of that offense and how much I hate that they are so reliant on jump shots and the three ball overall, that can kill you in certain situations. I do want to hyper-focus in what you were talking about with the bigs, Carson. So I think Porzingis is going to be imperative to this. I think Tatum is going to be imperative to this. How does Boston really shut down those backdoor lobs and all of those easy rim running opportunities that Luka creates out of the pick and roll? Like, how do you think they try to X out those easy lobs for Lively and Gafford and even Derrick Jones Jr. on the backside?
I think the single biggest thing is something that we already talked about, and it's just having Jayson Tatum guarding the bigs, because the ability to switch everything prevents those guys from getting behind the defense. It prevents them from having those lob opportunities created when they are the screener, and so I think that that'll lead Dallas to use them as the screeners less. And then even if they can get behind the defense, then you have Kristaps Porzingis there as the low man, because I don't think he's going to be guarding either one of them, who is obviously an awesome backline defender. So I just think they have much more flexibility in terms of how they play these coverages than Minnesota did. And a big reason for that is that Minnesota had two bigs on the floor at all times. So it wasn't like they were able to use Rudy Gobert as a roamer nearly as much, because that involved Cat having to play in space, and obviously you can't switch those actions with Cat in the same way that you can with Tatum. So I just think they are much better equipped to take away those bigs and the easy stuff that was created for them out of pick and roll.
I'm a little worried. I get what you're saying, and I think Boston has the personnel too. I don't know, man. Luka's throwing some of these balls up like so high that I just wonder, like, if he can work his way. And that's the big key, right? Is just keeping Luka out of the paint, because the longer you let him dwell down there hanging around, like, it just, you're going to be susceptible to those back doors when all the eyes are on Luka. It's just, I don't know, man. Let me ask you this too, because I think that personnel scheme works out. Mm-hmm. Do they play Al Horford off of the court in those looks? Like, can he survive in this series? I'm worried about Dallas really attacking him defensively too when he's on the court. I mean, with Luka and Kyrie out of pick and roll with their quickness and ability off of the dribble, I worry about him just defending in the pick and roll straight up. And then specifically, if you have him matched up with a 5, like a Lively or a Gafford, and I don't know, I think there's a big burden on Tatum or whoever's at the 4 spot on that weak side for blowing shit up. Do you think Al Horford could get played off the court in this series? I'm worried about him defensively.
I think that they'll probably do the same thing with Horford, even though he's not as effective a deterrent as KP, just to keep him out of those actions. As long as his minutes are overlapping with Jayson Tatum. When he does have to guard the big, if he's on the floor and Tatum is off, then I think that you may see some switching with Horford, and you may see some Horford playing straight up drop, neither of which I like very much. But ultimately, Horford isn't going to be nearly as big of a factor in this series as he has been in the past couple series because KP hasn't been on the floor. I think that Horford is going to be out there for 15 minutes a night, and for a backup big, I do still feel comfortable with him, like in the scope of how things could go among all backup bigs across the league. And again, if he's out there with Tatum, then I think they can deploy the same strategy.
Yeah, I think that, and that's kind of the conclusion that I'm reaching with a lot of this, though, man, is I think the biggest burden is on Jayson Tatum. I think Jayson Tatum is going to have to be and it's not like I don't trust. I've been very critical of Tatum offensively. I think Tatum has to be a defensive superstar in this series, man. Like, ending possessions relentlessly, switching on to Luka when he's tasked with doing stuff like that, blowing up backdoor lobs. Like, I think he is the X factor defensively for Boston. If everybody else can do their jobs, I think Tatum is the guy that's going to have to go above and beyond defensively to really disrupt Dallas.
He's a crucially important defensive player. Absolutely. And he has to hold his own on the glass, but I totally think that he can. Like, that's another reason that you're comfortable with him on the bigs. He's actually your best defensive rebounder. This Boston defense is really great. They're incredibly switchable. They have 2 big athletic wings. They have 2 strong 6'4" guards who are all defense level. And KP held opposing players 14% below their average inside of 6 feet this year. That was the best mark of any volume rim protector in the league. Every single player in this starting 5 is actively a very, very good defender. And I also think their collective rebounding is slept on. Like, this was the number 5 rebounding team in terms of rebound rate in the regular season, number 1 in playoff rebound rate. So they're a truly awesome defense. And although I do think Minnesota is a better defense than Boston, I think there's an argument that Boston, when they're fully engaged, when they're dialed in, matches up better because of their collective strength, which is really important against Luka, and because of the lack of any sort of weak point and the ability to hide your big out of pick and roll because of the versatile defensive player that Jayson Tatum is. So I do think very highly of this defense. We are this close to crowning an NBA champ, and with the action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
There's only so many games left, and DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live bettings, odd boosts, and so much more. Don't miss out, or you'll have to wait until next NBA season to place your bets. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your squad, and place your first bet. It's that simple.
New to DraftKings? Listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5 and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500 if your first bet doesn't hit. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. On the flip side, Logan, how do you view Dallas's defense and how they can match up with this Boston offense?
I think they can be really disruptive. Now, it's an interesting dynamic that we have going on here with Dallas versus Boston because, as I mentioned earlier, you know, Boston has the lowest paint frequency of any team in basketball, and they're the highest jump shot frequency team in basketball. So I just wonder, like, do the Celtics just try to outshoot Dallas? And how much is their rim deterrent really going to take away from Boston's offense? Jaylen Brown has shot 65% in the paint during these playoffs. That's the best of any player. And and they're going up against elite rim protection. Dallas has held their opposing teams to a mark of 51% at the rim in these playoffs. Players are shooting 45.2% versus Gafford at the rim. That is the best of any player in these playoffs. They're shooting 49.3% versus Lively at the rim. That's the third best in the playoffs. Like, they legitimately have two of the best rim protectors in basketball, man. Even more so, a crazy number. They have a defensive rating, Carson, of these playoffs of 98.5 with Derek Lively on the floor. You just can't sing that kid's praises enough, man. He is a superhero rookie, dude, with what he has done. So that's an interesting dynamic to me, man, is I don't really know is Dallas really going to disrupt Boston's offense all that much? Like, Boston is so dependent on three balls. Now, there's a double-edged sword to this, right? Because there's a big reason that I'm critical of Boston's offense. Because they do settle for so many jumpers, and it can leave your offense stagnating, and you can go through these big lulls where you're not hitting anything, and you're not getting anything easy. And that's where I think it favors Dallas's defense. Because if you can get them in a bad shooting slump, guess what? Lively and Gafford are going to take away the rim. They're not going to let you get anything easy down there, and that is huge for going on runs. But also on the other end of that, it's like you can't take away the one thing that Boston does at a superhuman level, and that's shoot the hell out of the pill. And so in some games, they could just knock down 23s, and guess what? You can't hang. Sorry, Dallas, you played a great game, but we're just going to spray threes. And that is the ultimate weapon that Boston has. Again, I've been very critical of them all series long, all season long, but it is the X factor that Boston can weaponize versus any team, is the fact that they have so many great shooters. But with that, I also think it's important that Kristaps Porzingis is on the floor and does get going.
Absolutely.
You can't emphasize, how great he was for this team and breaking up bad runs and just adding a new dimension to their offense. He was the number one post scorer in all of basketball this season. He averaged 1.3 points per post up, and he was a 39% catch and shooter. And standing at 7'3", you can just shoot over anybody that's on you. So I think it's really crucial that Porzingis is out there on the floor, that he gets going, that they feed him enough and get him easy looks and try to break up some of the monotony. But where do you come down on this? Because I think it's an interesting dynamic that they're so jump shot heavy and Dallas is so good at protecting the rim. Do you think they cancel each other out? Who do you think is favored in this matchup?
It's a really interesting matchup on that front. I do want to start out with literally how I expect them to match up in terms of assignment. I think Luka's going to be on Drew. I think Kyrie's going to be on Derek White. I expect them to go PJ on Tatum, but I actually think that Derek Jones Jr. on Tatum is probably the better answer. And the reason is that allows you to put your best perimeter defender on Tatum. Derek Jones Jr. is Dallas's best perimeter defender, and Tatum is Boston's best offensive player. And Derek Jones Jr. is shorter and slighter, which is the reason I don't think that they'll do it. But I would be inclined to make Tatum prove that he can be a bully in that matchup, because Jaylen Brown is the more consistently physical, downhill, bully ball oriented player. And that's where PJ Washington holds up better because of that strength dimension. So that's probably the ideal configuration, in my opinion. In terms of how they match up, like how I like Dallas's defense against Boston's offense, I think they match up decently well. It's a really, really good defense. Boston is built in many ways upon mismatch attacking. They don't tend to win with their quickness. They tend to win with their size and their strength, pinpointing weak points. Dallas's defense is pretty mismatch proof. Like, they are mostly a big defense with no real weak links, but you mentioned Kristaps Porzingis, Logan. He is going to be massive in this series because Dallas may have no real weak links, but like KP is the sort of exceptional mismatch attacker where you put an average 6'7" wing on him, like that's a mismatch, right? He's 7'3". His balance is so good. He's been so physical. He can just shoot over the top of you. He's so great from the mid-range that your size just isn't going to affect him whatsoever. So if Dallas is switch happy in this matchup, which they very well may be, they like switching everything. Now, they don't always do it, but against OKC, they were comfortable doing that. Then KP is going to destroy them. So I think that we will see a moderate amount of switching from Dallas in this series, but not a crazy amount, just because I think that KP will punish them for doing so. Also, Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum are both so strong that even though Kyrie has been really good defensively throughout these playoffs, like just as a matter of size, they're going to be able to attack him. So one of the ways that Dallas has prevented any real mismatch attacking and any sort of really effective isolation scoring is just by loading up with help. That's what we saw against SGA, who, by the way, was still able to score with great volume and really good efficiency because he was so ridiculous as a shot maker. But he didn't get any of the easy stuff around the rim that we're used to because Dallas had their big roaming off of a wing at all times. And so that elite rim protector was parked in the paint. Then we saw, again, that constant help presence in the Minnesota series because they didn't have a 5-out offense, because Rudy Gobert is not going to hold you accountable for being parked in the paint, for helping off of him consistently. Boston, as you say, has an obscene amount of shooting to punish that. And I also trust Jayson Tatum to make the skip passes necessary against this defense more than Anthony Edwards. I do think he's a more mature playmaker. Also, Boston just has a ton of aggregate playmaking. So when it comes to putting the defense in rotation, making multiple swing passes, and then getting the ball to a 40% shooter no matter what, I really like how they match up there. So that game-breaking shooting is the difference, because Dallas took away the rim effectively against OKC, and the Thunder couldn't create and they couldn't make enough threes. Their offense was a bit too stagnant and their shooters didn't really step up. Same goes for Minnesota. I think Boston is different there, and I do think that that means that they match up better than anyone else.
Yeah, and one of those guys is Derek White too, man, who's been phenomenal in this playoff run. With his shooting, and like that dude, man, like I know you can look at all the numbers and you can look at all the 40% catch and shooters. Like that guy is one of the best catch and shooters I've ever seen. It doesn't matter if there's a hand up in his face, man, how quick he gets the rock up. He's stone cold, man. I trust Derek White with my life, dude. And you talk about the aggregate playmaking. That's the beauty, is that it's everybody can kill you here. I do wonder, and I think this is going to be a crucial dynamic too. Obviously, who executes one another down the stretch is going to be important, but I really think the clutch offensive rating battle, like the clutch, offense battle between these two teams is going to be really interesting to monitor. Dallas was the number 1 clutch offense in terms of offensive rating in the regular season. Boston was number 6, and we saw Boston, despite having a relatively easy path to the finals, struggle. They had a lot of games coming down to the wire. And again, they were without Kristaps Porzingis, so, they never really had their backs up against the wall, so you can understand them taking their foot off the gas a little bit. But they got into close battles against Indiana that come down to the wire, against Cleveland that come down to the wire. Like, again, this is stating the obvious, but I really do think that whichever offense executes in the home stretch is going to determine an outcome of 2 or 3 games in this series, man. I don't expect there to be many blowouts. I think these teams, I know Dallas is the 6th seed coming into these playoffs. I think these teams are very evenly matched. I think they're balanced out. And with as many close calls that Boston had leading up to the finals, as many close calls that Dallas had, like, I trust Dallas a little bit more, I think, in the clutch to operate and to handle business just marginally. It's not a major gap, but I think I trust Dallas in these close, grimy environments just a little bit more than I do Boston, and I think that's going to be crucial in at least a few of these games in the finals.
I absolutely trust Dallas more in terms of clutch offense. Like, they are absolutely exceptional there, and that is where they destroyed Minnesota in games 1 through 3. That's where they won the series. They have the 2 best pure shot makers in this series. They have 2 of the best pure shot makers on the planet. That is a big clutch advantage. Like, they have 2 closers who would be damn near any team in the league's number 1 closer. And on the flip side, Boston has a reputation for being a team that crumbles in the clutch. But Boston's actually been really good in the clutch all year, and they have way more options than they have in years past. KP and Derek White have both been awesome in the clutch, and they just add different dimensions to this offense where you're not always relying on Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum's one-on-one shot making and their playmaking always holding up. Like, Derek White running side pick and roll down the stretch for you is awesome offense. He's going to make the right reads. He's a lethal pull-up shooter. He's going to get to his floaters. KP hunting post-ups is awesome offense. Their shooting everywhere is great. They also just have even more offensive skill, even more sound decision-making and playmaking with Drew Holiday on the floor. Like, I absolutely trust Dallas's top 2 dudes more. I think you'd be crazy not to. But Boston has 5 guys who I trust, and that is a difference from years past, and they've been just significantly better. Their clutch net rating this year was plus 15 in the regular season. It was under plus 5 last year. In the playoffs, this is hilarious because it's a crazy small sample size, but plus 43 net rating in the clutch. Last year, they were minus 11 in the clutch. So where that has previously been a clear weakness for this team, I think they are significantly improved. I do still trust Dallas's clutch process more. I trust Dallas's clutch shot making more. I still give them a pure edge in the clutch. And while that may decide a couple games in this series, it's not an overwhelming enough advantage to swing my view here as it might have been with different iterations of this Boston team. Like, I just think they're better. I don't think that they're going to melt down. Dallas is going to be awesome, but I do think Boston will hold up relatively well in these situations. And then I do think they're the better basketball team, Logan. Maybe that's where we disagree. You say that these teams are even. In terms of basketball talent, I do not think that that's the case.
Did you just give us a little spoiler there?
No. I'm just talking through my thoughts. But speaking of that basketball talent, it is remarkable with Boston. You mentioned KP, Logan. The guy is an absolute monster.
Mm-hmm.
And Dallas fans will probably be like, no, he's not. That guy's a disappointment. We watched that guy for a couple years and he did nothing but piss us off. Dallas KP pissed me the hell off too, man. But he is just a different beast. I really cannot overemphasize how much he's gotten better since leaving Dallas, how much he's embraced the defensive end of the floor, how dominant he's become as a mismatch attacker, how much more physical he's become in those situations. And he takes away so much of what Dallas wants to do defensively. They want to load up help. Well, his shooting punishes that. They want to potentially switch aggressively. His post play is just devastating if they try to do that. He can absolutely be Boston's second best player in this series. I thought he was their second best player in the regular season. And Jaylen's been playing really, really well. KP has been hurt. So I don't know if the presumption should be that he'll be their second best player, but I do like this matchup for him more than I do for Jaylen, and I just expect him to ball out. I'm extremely confident in KP, and should have said this off the top. Basically, everything that I'm saying about this series is presuming that KP plays. If KP doesn't play, well, then my outlook is dramatically different. But just given how much time he's had off, it seems like he's trending in the right direction. White and Holiday as well, though, Logan, as you mentioned, are balling. Derek White in these playoffs is 18-4-5 on 63% true shooting. One of the best pure shooters on the planet, a 90th percentile pick and roll creator. As we just talked about, a huge clutch ball handler for this team. Jrue Holiday, in this 7-game win streak for Boston, 17-7-5 on 74% true shooting. He is shooting the hell out of the ball. He's playing bully ball really selectively and effectively. And just the fact that he has so much less of an offensive burden has allowed him to be a much more efficient version of himself than we ever saw in Milwaukee, which has been really nice to see. Like, their talent is just overwhelming. I really like Dallas' supporting cast. And I think what they did with the resources they had is absolutely remarkable. But it's just a different level of talent with Boston, right? We're talking about 5 dudes who, if you paid $30 million a year, nobody would bat an eye. Boston doesn't just have 5 of the 7 best players in this series. The difference between their 5th guy, Jrue Holiday, in my opinion, and Dallas's 3rd guy, whether you think that's Derek Lively or Derek Jones Jr., like, that's big, man. That's a big difference. And that's a huge deal in this series. It just makes them such a complete team with so many options on both sides of the ball. That's why they're a juggernaut. That's why this Boston team was so great in the regular season and is still viewed as a clear favorite in terms of Vegas heading into these finals. Like, they just have a special level of basketball talent in that starting 5.
They do, and I'm glad you bring up those guys. One with Kristaps. I mean, I think Kristaps is the X factor in the series in terms of what he gives you, and situation makes all the difference, right? I was also frustrated with him in Dallas. Rick Carlisle literally told Buddy, "Hey, man, just go stand in the corner." It's not anybody's game, man. And he goes to Washington. He refines his role a little bit more, and then he comes here to Boston and just changes all the dynamics for them. The biggest one is the floor spacing. The fact that he can drag Lively and Gafford out of the paint. Again, that's the hallmark of this Dallas defense, right? Like, they take away the rim. By taking those guys out of the paint, guess what you're doing? You're not only getting a 40% three-point shooter out to the line where he can eat and just shoot over any of these other bigs. You're opening up the paint for opportunities on the backside for great cutters, for smart players, and more importantly, for Jaylen Brown, who attacking a clean paint is going to eat if Gafford and Lively aren't down there. So He changes everything for Boston. He is the clear X factor to me. But Drew and Derek White are too offensively. And the one weak point that I look at Dallas and think that those two guys could attack is Kyrie Irving. And I love Kyrie. I think he has been playing phenomenal defense all playoffs long. I have been astounded at his level that he has reached there. The intensity, the strength too, man. Kyrie's a strong dude for, being a little bit undersized. I wonder if Holiday and White can back him down and work on him in the post a little bit. And that's where Drew is a beast. Mm-hmm. Against smaller guards, man, he will take you to town. He will just get you down on that right elbow, get to a little post fade, a little layup. And I wonder, I know Kyrie's been playing the best defense of his career. I wonder if those guys can outstrength him and get to some easy looks on the low block there. And those are real advantages that I think Boston has that, like you said, man, other teams couldn't punish them for. You've got Rudy Gobert parked down there in the paint. He's clogging the lane up for his teammates. He's not spacing the floor out at all. Those guys are camped down there. Oklahoma City couldn't punish them for it, right? You got non-shooters out there where you can load up the paint. That's the one area where I wonder if I wonder if I should swing this series in Boston's favor, because it's a key dynamic that none of these other teams have been able to exploit Dallas's defense, and I think Boston can in that area.
And that's why I think that you have to have Luka on Drew, because just when it comes down to like the physical bullying that you're talking about, that's where I do think Drew is on a different level from Derek White. Like his willingness to play actual post-up bully ball, it's something that you rarely see from a guard. But I'm not even so much worried about the two guards going at Kyrie. I really worry about Tatum and Brown, because like these dudes just love having the guard set screens for them. They love forcing those switches. And Jaylen Brown is playing the best basketball of his life right now. I just made a YouTube video about this a couple days ago. He's playing like a top 20 guy on the planet. 25 a night on 61% true shooting in these playoffs. Has been an isolation machine, averaging 1.17 points per ISO. As you mentioned, has been extremely effective downhill, but has also just been phenomenal as a shot maker. He's just playing really outstanding basketball. We mentioned how good he's been defensively this whole year, but it's really been offensively that he's at his best right now in these playoffs. He's also taking care of the ball much better than last year. He's cut down on his lost ball turnovers by 40%. So the whole meme of Jaylen Brown has no left hand, Jaylen Brown has no handle, like he's doing everything that he can to beat those allegations right now. He's also been super efficient finishing with his left hand or driving to the left in these playoffs, and he's not over dribbling. His ball handling has really been quite good. So he's playing awesome. I do think this series could be a little tougher for him because of his playmaking limitations versus the help. You talk about how crucial KP is to trying to force those bigs out of the paint. Jaylen is the one guy where it's like, okay, how consistently are you going to make the necessary passes to create for these shooters? He can make basic reads, but he's not as consistent a playmaker as Holiday, as White, or as Jayson Tatum. But he's been awesome as a scorer. He can hunt those specific mismatches, and he can go to work there. Logan, we haven't even talked about Jayson Tatum offensively, and I'm very interested in what you have to say about Jayson Tatum, because I know how you feel about the guy. And I imagine it is one of the key factors for you in this series. So how do you feel about Tatum offensively here?
I mean, I think there's a significant gap between Tatum and Luka and Kyrie. And I think there have been a lot of games in this playoff run where Jaylen Brown has been the better offensive player. And like that is the beauty of this Boston machine, right, is that you do have so many guys that are so talented that can alleviate the pressure off of him. I worry about Tatum just in terms of his play style, man, and more so over than Luka, right? Luka had his games in the start of these playoffs where he was settling for his three-point shot, and he wasn't working down into the mid-range, and Tatum just, he has those games, man. I don't know, there's like a lack of consistency that I get with Tatum's offensive game that's frustrating, where some games he is working more downhill, and he's weaponizing his, post-ups into playmaking. And that's really where I want Tatum to work in this series, man. I want Tatum to back guys down. I want him to get into that mid-post. I want him to touch the paint and work from there. And if that's kicking out to an open shooter after creating an advantage, or if that's turning into a post fade, like, I just want Tatum to work and hunt those really high-quality shots and not settle for off-the-dribble threes and off-the-dribble pull-ups, especially when his jumper isn't hitting. And that's the beauty, too, is there have been games where Tatum has settled for these jumpers, but normally later in the game, he will adopt something different. He'll give you more defensively, he'll give you more rebounding, he'll work to get more downhill if his shots aren't falling. But there's been a lot of games in these playoff runs, Carson, where he's missing point-blank layups, he's missing open threes. The one damning number for Jayson Tatum coming into this NBA Finals for me is the fact that he's shooting 33% on pull-up twos. This is a Dallas defense that likes taking away the rim. This is a Dallas defense that is going to make you work for your shots. And those are the shots that you can't take away. I trust Luka and Kyrie to make those shots. The level that Tatum's been at, I don't know. It's going to change game to game. And that's where I really worry about Tatum, man, is in just pull-up jumpers. It looks smooth, man, and he can get to these looks effortlessly. But he's been off a lot of nights offensively, man, where the team, the collective, has carried him. And I don't think he can get away with it in this series. I think he has to be this team's best offensive player. I think he has to be this team's best offensive player in the clutch. And he's really got to carry his weight. And so, I don't know, man. To say the least, I'm skeptical. I've been skeptical of Tatum all season. I've been skeptical of Tatum throughout the playoff run. And he scares me, man. He is, like, consistency-wise, I think I trust Derek White and Jaylen Brown a little bit more to deliver. Tatum can have these explosions, man, but his touch has been off certain nights. He's looked off a little bit mentally. I want him to work to hunt and find high-quality shots, man. I want him to weaponize his post-game more. I want him to work downhill. I want him to weaponize his strength more, and I think he can do that. But I'm always skeptical, man. And that pull-up jump shooting number, I think it's going to be critical in this series that shot is on specifically against this defense, and he's not been at a good enough level in this playoff run, man. Are you more optimistic than me? I think this is kind of expected of me to give the negative Jayson Tatum take. And I am clouded a little bit more by my negative Boston bias. So, in an unbiased opinion, Carson, do you think that, am I selling Tatum a little short here?
I don't think that you said anything crazy there. I do think that I'm a little bit higher on him than you in the context of this series and big picture, which is funny because I'm not a big Tatum guy in the scheme of things, but Logan, you are the furthest thing from a Tatum guy I think that there is out there. Although we're going to have a guest on our show tomorrow who actually rivals and may even surpass you. You guys can have a Jayson Tatum hater convention. He's been playing really well, though. During the 7-game win streak, 30, 11, and 6.5 on 58% true shooting. And I do think has been much more consistently assertive as a scorer than he was early in the playoffs, which bodes well to me. His pull-up jumper, his jumper has just been off, period. You mentioned the 2-point numbers, the mid-range numbers haven't been good, 29% from deep in the playoffs. But if he can get his shot going, then this is clearly the best version of Tatum that we've ever seen, because this is the best he's been as a playmaker. Like, he had a lot of really impressive moments in that 2022 finals run. He also had a lot of games where it was just like, Jayson, what are you doing? Take better care of the basketball, right? I mean, he averaged over 4 turnovers a game in that run. He's 5.9 assists to 2.4 turnovers per game in these playoffs. So to me, it's the best combination of making the advanced reads out of pick and roll and taking care of the basketball that we've seen. He's been a 90th percentile pick and roll creator. His defense and rebounding has been absolutely vital. He's as good as he's ever been there. I do want to see him settle less, as you say. Absolutely. I want to see him play more true bully ball. And as I said earlier, I want Dallas to test him there. Like, put Derrick Jones Jr. on him and say, okay, Jayson, you've got 25, 30 pounds on this guy. Like, get downhill against him. He's only been a 15th percentile post-up scorer in the playoffs and 29th percentile isolation. He was better than 70th percentile in both of those play types in the regular season. And a lot of that is just him taking a bunch of tough turnarounds and then him missing his pull-up threes in isolation. I don't want to see him settling for those looks. Now, I do expect him to shoot better. I don't want to overreact to shooting variance because he's just been cold, but it's not out of the question that he goes cold in this series. He's had cold postseasons from deep. Like, he's not an elite three-point shooter, and so that's where getting to the rim consistently just provides a floor that he needs. I do not have the most faith in Jayson Tatum, but I do think this is the best he's been, and I think that the level he's been playing at over these last 7 games is good enough for them to win it all, especially if his shot starts falling. And one of the most ridiculous things that I've already started to see going into this series is viewing this as Tatum versus Luka. I could not really think of a more absurd way to frame this series. Now, could that be a key factor? Absolutely. If Luka is just multiple levels above Jayson Tatum, that could be the thing that swings this series. But there is so much more at play here. Luka is clearly the better basketball player, always has been. I know that that's been a debate throughout this year. I just don't think it's a legitimate one. I think Jayson Tatum does get the benefit of playing on such a great team, of having the Boston fan base behind him. Of course, there's the constant debate of if Luka Doncic did that, his averages would go down. If Jayson Tatum did that, his team would win, et cetera, et cetera. Luka is clearly better, but Boston just has way more talent and way more options. And Tatum doesn't need to be their best offensive player every night. And there is a floor with what he brings defensively that is very legitimate. So, yeah, obviously I expect Luka to be better in this series. I just don't think Tatum has to be on Luka's level for Boston to win. I have a lot of confidence in the talent of this basketball team. Before we get into our final picks, Logan, I do want to just touch on one quick thing. Who are some specific role players who you think could have their moment in this series? Like some guys off the bench who you think this is going to be a this guy series, this is not going to be a that guy series?
It's a good question. I think.
Thank you.
I think Kleba is really important in this series. I think, like, defensively, how he matches up with Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I've clowned on Kleba before. I shouldn't. Kleba's a really good player. Like, in terms of what he brings defensively, the versatility you can get with lineup-wise. Like, you know, if Boston really wants to stretch the defense out, maybe you go Kleba at the 5 a little bit and match up there. I do think you're losing something on the glass in certain matchups, but I would implement him in this series with his size, with his perimeter defense, with what he brings on the interior, and knock down 1-3 in Game 5. You know, maybe he's heating up. Maybe he's heating up a little bit. Kleba is a guy I would implement heavily in this one, and on a marginal level, I don't know how big he's going to be in this one, but Jaden Hardy in spurts is like giving Luka and Kyrie, I think, a breather a little bit. Same goes for Peyton Pritchard, too. I like what Pritchard has brought. I would implement him sparingly because I think he is a significant weak point defensively that Kyrie and Luka are just going to go at if he is getting significant playing time. But I think he can alleviate a little bit of pressure off of the starting 5 with what he brings off the bench. But the specific guys I would point to, Kleba for sure. And I think you got to get a good Al Horford series. The only reason I say this, man, is like Boston doesn't have the luxury of another big. Look, dude, shout out Luke Cornett. Shout out what he did in the lead up to these finals. You cannot play Luke Cornett in the finals, my man. If Luka Doncic is on the court, they're giving him a screen. That dude is running drop like he is spraying threes. I just think that Horford's got to be hitting his shots. He's got to be hustling. He's got to be defending well in space. You just got to get a good Al Horford series because you don't really have anybody else you can turn to, right? Boston's 7 deep. I don't think they should go any deeper than that. And if they do, I really hope it's O'Shea Brissett and not Hauser or Cornett, man.
Dude, Sam Hauser, 5 threes in a game incoming, bro. I can see it so clearly. The crystal ball has told me. And guess what? Then you're going to have to call him White Boy of the Year. When he hits 5 threes in Game 6 of the finals,
dude, Dante
you are going to have to call him
White Boy of the Year.
Doesn't matter, recency bias.
Dude, if Sam Hauser gets White Boy of the Year, I'm done. I'm giving away my vote. You guys can have it.
Yeah, they should change that shit to Cracker of the Year. Sam Hauser wins it. But I think Hauser will actually play a little bit in this series.
Hope not.
Honestly, Logan, I'm less worried about him than I am Peyton Pritchard. I really like Peyton Pritchard. Peyton Pritchard has had a really good year. He's had a really good postseason. You hit on the key point, though, dude. Rewatching their regular season matchup, once Dallas was actually Dallas and they had all their dudes, like, Luka wasn't just getting a bucket on Peyton Pritchard every time. It was like a guaranteed and one. It was like, yeah, I'll take the bucket and the foul. Thank you very much, little man. He's just too small. Like, Luka will brutalize a player that small on the floor. So I think that when Luka's not on the floor, please play him away because Peyton Pritchard is a very valuable offensive player and he competes defensively. It just doesn't matter when you're conceding whatever, 6 inches and 50 pounds to a guy. So that'll be interesting. I do think that Boston should just tighten up their rotation overall in this series. I definitely agree. And because of the KP injury, we've had to see more Cornett and see more Tillman and see more Hauser. Peyton Pritchard has played a lot. He's played over 20 minutes a game. I think that they will get tighter with their rotation. I agree with you on the Kleba point for Dallas as well. Just to have another strong, versatile defender on the floor. I do expect to see more of him at the 4 than at the 5 in this matchup. He always unlocks those small ball looks for you. I just... don't know that Dallas needs to turn to those, but maybe like if the bigs really aren't having an impact offensively, you could see it for a brief stretch. I also expect to see a good amount of Josh Green. He's a little small to guard both Jayson and Jaylen, and we saw that in the regular season, but he's still a good versatile defender. He brings the athleticism. He brings the constant energy. That's where I worry about Jaden Hardy. I really like the influx of offense that he brought this past series, but I think just as we talk about not wanting Peyton Pritchard on the floor because of his defense for Boston, the same can be said for Jaden Hardy. He's a little bit bigger, but he's a worse defender in a vacuum, I would say, than Peyton Pritchard. And Boston is just a team that specializes in mismatch attacking. So I don't think it's really a Hardy series, even though he was really fun last series. I do not think it's a THJ series. Again, the defensive issues. It could be a Dante Exum series, depending on how he's playing offensively. If he's struggling and he hasn't been good there in these playoffs, then I would just give more minutes to Josh Green. But I feel like Dallas kind of has more options with the deep bench, whereas it's like Boston, once you get past those top 8, I would include Hauser in that 8 because of his shooting. It's like, yeah, you really don't want any of those dudes playing in the playoffs. All right, Logan, give me your pick. What does it come down to?
I know you gaff at Luka versus Tatum, and I think it is pretty funny. This is going to be a crowning moment for somebody socially, right? Somebody's going to get anointed. Either Luka is going to be the best player in the world, and he will have earned that title, rightfully so, or Jayson Tatum.
Are you saying
Tatum,
you believe that, or you're saying that's what you think the discourse will be?
The discourse is going to be. I would still take Jokic. I think it's Jokic and Luka right now is my 1 and 2. And you could debate Giannis, I'd say, with some of his offensive limitations and his injuries. I would probably lean Jokic and Luka. Somebody's going to get anointed, though. Either Luka's going to be the best player in the world or Jayson Tatum is going to be the best 19-year-old to ever play the game of basketball. So somebody's going to get it. I am going to take the Dallas Mavericks in 6. I think Luka's going to be the best player on the court. I believe in Dallas's clutch offense a little bit more, and I think Boston's style of play can be detrimental to their success. There is a scenario, by all means. Of course, I have to add a caveat so I can always be right?
Very smart.
I do think Dallas's shooting is pivotal in this series, and I know that you can make that as a blanket statement for any basketball team, but specifically in this matchup against a team with so many great shooters, right? There's going to be a couple of nights where I think Boston's shooting is off, and it costs them, right? Again, they're the most jump shot heavy team in basketball. Mm-hmm. They attempt the least amount of shots in the paint per game, and they are prone to off nights offensively. So there's going to be a few nights where they're off. But collectively, I really do wonder if shooting is going to be the difference. You talk about Josh Green and Dante Exum off the bench. Dallas' shooting just isn't as reliable. If it's Exum, if it's Green, if it's P.J. Washington, if it's Derrick Jones Jr., if Boston makes a conscious effort to sell out on Luka Doncic, not to Oklahoma City's extent, but sell out, on Luka, the burden is going to be on these shooters to make open looks. Boston's going to hit their open looks consistently, right, at a high enough clip throughout a series where it's going to be high. I wonder if Dallas's shooting just goes cold for a little bit. Luka's not hitting his step-back threes. That's the one area where I'm worried. But there's such a significant gap to me between Luka and Tatum offensively that I'm going to take Dallas. And I think that's going to win out. And I just think Luka is unstoppable. If he carries that shooting that he had in Minnesota series, I'm confident in them, and I'm confident in Dallas's defense to do this. But I think this is a great series, and I think Boston's a great team. But I'm going to take the Mavericks in 6.
I'm excited. You say this is going to be a great series. I agree. I do think that broadly, Celtics hate and skepticism has gone too far. I saw Matt Sponauer put out a poll of who people thought was going to win this series, and it was something like 55% Dallas, and I think that reflects the public opinion. That doesn't reflect, as I mentioned earlier, like the gambling odds where Boston is considered a pretty clear favorite. People really, really do not like this Boston team, and there's an overwhelming tendency to focus on the negative with them. And by the way, that does not at all exclude us. Like, that's what's been so weird about this Boston season, this Boston playoff path. Like, there hasn't been a ton of opportunities to just gush praise upon them because all they've done is take care of business against a weaker path. And honestly, it just becomes more interesting to focus on their little flaws when they're that much better than the team they're facing, and everything is viewed through the prism of, okay, once Boston is in the finals, we know Boston is going to be in the finals. We knew Boston was going to be in the finals from like the first 30 games of the year when it was like, okay, yeah, Dame and Giannis, this Bucks team isn't as good as we thought. Boston's a level above everybody else. They've been held to that standard. But it feels like they have gotten all the blowback of being presumed as a great team without getting the credit for the fact that they are just legitimately that great. And I said earlier this year, I thought this Boston team, before we even got into the playoffs, was better than every champion that we saw from 2019 to 2022 in that immediate post-Warriors era. I said that if they don't win a title this year or next, I would be pretty surprised by that. And I picked Denver over them, and I viewed them as a slight favorite over Boston throughout the year and going up to before the playoffs. I thought that was a really tough matchup for them, but Denver didn't get here. And then I thought Minnesota would be a tough matchup. I was pretty conflicted on that one. I thought their defense and physicality would be a problem, but Minnesota didn't get here. And if Minnesota had survived last series even, I think that they were too flawed a basketball team. I probably would have ended up going with Boston in that matchup. So even as we look at this like underwhelming playoff run, I guess, they have by far the best net rating. They're 12-2, and they've done that without their second or third best player, depending on how you view Kristaps Porzingis. So we just can't lose sight of how legitimately great this team is. They had the number 1 offense and the number 2 defense in this regular season. They had a better net rating than the 2017 Warriors, one of the handful of best point differentials in NBA history. And they have 5 of the top 50 or so players in the NBA, Logan. That does not happen. I tried to think of historical examples, and there's a few teams who are close. The 2017 Warriors obviously have 4, but they don't have that 5th. I don't think Iggy was quite at that level. The 04-06 Pistons, close. Tayshaun isn't quite at that level. The 1990 Pistons are close. I think you probably have to go back to the 87 Lakers, which would be Magic, Kareem, Worthy, Byron Scott, Michael Cooper, and maybe the 86 Celtics, Bird, McHale, Parrish, Dennis Johnson. Danny Ainge had a really good postseason. I don't know that you would call him a top 50 player. Those are 2 of the greatest teams of all time, though. And like, even those examples are not as clear as this Boston team is. Like, when you're just talking about how good that 5th guy is, Drew Holiday is better than a Michael Cooper. He's better than a Danny Ainge, like, clearly. So I just want to appreciate that. And there's this notion that these are the same old Celtics. They're just not. KP is a complete game changer on both sides of the ball. Drew is a 100 times upgrade from Marcus Smart. Derek White has taken another sizable leap. Jaylen and Jayson, it's more marginal, but they're both the best that they've ever been, in my opinion. This team has improved significantly in the clutch. So 3-point shooting variance, as you mentioned, can still take a game or 2 from them because they are very reliant on it. Also, though, it's the reason that they were comfortably the number 1 offense in basketball, because they're a 39% 3-point shooting team, and everybody on the floor with their starting 5, and with Al Horford, and Peyton Pritchard, and Sam Hauser, basically everybody in their rotation is an awesome 3-point shooter. They've had their effort lapses, but in the NBA Finals, I do not think that that'll be an issue. So I think this is an overwhelmingly talented basketball team with so many potential heroes on any night. So many dudes who could step up and even be your best player on any night in the NBA Finals, with a pretty airtight formula defensively when they are engaged. And again, I do like how they match up with their ability to switch so much, and with an obscene amount of shooting and shot creation and physical advantages on offense. They're just a very, very complete basketball team. And if Kyrie and Luka don't combine for 60 or very close to it, like, Dallas probably can't win a game in this series. If Jaylen and Jayson combine for 40, Boston absolutely can win on any night. That's the difference. It's not about the stars. I have more faith in Dallas's stars. It is about an overwhelming level of basketball talent down this roster, down this starting 5. It's about the supporting cast. Boston's just different there, and that's ultimately why I am more confident in this matchup, and I am taking Boston in 6.
Man.
Yeah.
I don't blame you. And Boston's got experience too, man. You know, this is what they've got 6 conference finals in 8 years. You know, they're back to the finals here. Tatum and Brown have played in a lot of big basketball games. And this is not to say that Luka and Kyrie haven't earlier, but that's the key, dude. More so than anything else, dude. Luka and Kyrie have to deliver every single night offensively. Like, the aggregate in Boston will produce. Mm-hmm. You can't really say that about Dallas, right? I think we're in for an all-timer, though, dude. One more team I want to give a shout-out to. All-timer. Classic series, man. I think we're in for it.
All right.
83 Sixers. Would they be on that short list of most talented teams ever?
Well, I'm just thinking very specifically about the 5 dudes who are top
Dr.
50.
J, Moses,
I mean,
Tony, Bobby Jones,
yeah,
Mo
yeah.
Cheeks.
I think yeah, they have 5. I think that's a really good choice.
I don't know. That was another
In
one
fact,
that,
I think that
popped
they
in my
are
brain.
arguably more clear. Once I got back to the mid 80s and found a couple where I was like, yeah, all right, I feel like these are arguable. I kind of stopped looking back further throughout history, but I think that's a really good choice. I think that's a more solid 5. Bobby Jones being your 5th best guy, one of the best defensive players ever. Very good playmaking forward. Great call. Great call.
I'm ecstatic, man. And you know what? I'm kind of happy that it played out this way, man. If it was, I think any of these finals matchups would have been interesting, but we got a little swerve. Everybody was kind of going chalk heading into these playoffs, thinking we'd get Nuggets Celtics, and here we are, man. And finally, I know that we've mentioned this dynamic, Carson, a million times too, leading up to this series, but the final dynamic that's super interesting is that one of these guys are going to get revenge on their old team. The fact that KP is going up against Dallas, Kyrie is going back up against Boston. I assume there'll be a chorus of boos for both of these guys in their opposing, courts. Also, you see what happens when you get rid of Grant Williams, man? You go to the finals.
I knew you were going to go there.
Dude, I mean, this is great for my propaganda.
It is.
I'm going to put this everywhere, dude.
Yeah.
I'm going to make both of them. You Michelin Man, Stay Puft Marshmallow looking dude.
Oh,
you get rid of Grant
guy.
Williams, good things happen. Take notes, Charlotte. Charlotte, go and trade Grant Williams. You'll be in the finals next year. It's easy work.
Yeah, dude, this is really good for your anti-Grant Williams agenda. Poor guy. He's just trying to save Gotham, bro. He's a selfless hero, and he's also a playboy billionaire. And everybody wants a piece of Grant Williams, and you're hating on him, and it just brings me down. But it's not a good look for Granny Boy. We can be honest about that. It's an interesting matchup, though, dude. And it's just like a fascinating test of the precedent of best player on the floor versus best team. And we can't necessarily act like there is a clear, permanent answer there because overwhelmingly it is true that you need a top 5 player to win the title. Overwhelmingly. At the same time, Logan, like we just had to go, 35, 40 years back before finding a complete starting 5 that we feel has the level of talent top to bottom that this Boston team does. So Luka is the sort of superhuman who can just take over and who can propel you above the other team. And I don't want to discredit that possibility. Dallas could win because he just has like one of those signature all-time series. But there's very few teams with the level of basketball talent that Boston does have. So I'm very excited. Last thing that we didn't really touch on. Which coach do you trust more in this matchup?
Please, bro.
This guy hates Joe Mazzulla because he loves the town. This guy doesn't appreciate the town. Ben Affleck and what's his face? Hawkeye.
He's probably Jeremy Renner. He's probably watching it as we speak, man. He's getting all amped up for the finals. I trust Jason Kidd way more. I think Jason Kidd has caught a lot of flack for what he did in previous years with other teams like the Nets and the Bucks. I think Jason Kidd is a phenomenal coach. I think his defensive scheme is great. I think his offensive scheme is great. I think Jason Kidd is brilliant.
Well, to be fair, his offensive scheme is kind of just...
Hey, Luka,
right,
go put
Kyrie.
in work, yeah.
But he's a really good defensive coach. He's a really good defensive coach.
I think Kidd is smart with matchups, man. I think he's smart schematically. No hate to Mazzulla. There's just been more moments with Mazzulla where I'm caught scratching my head going, hey, man, why don't we burn a timeout here? Hey, what, Joe?
And he's thinking, remember when they put on those masks?
Yeah.
Remember when they put on those nun masks and then they robbed that bank and Ben Affleck says, I got to get out of Boston.
And he's thinking about building sandcastles and stuff like that. I think Mazzulla's a good coach, too. I don't want that to get lost in the shuffle here, but, Mazzulla is he still the youngest coach in basket? Is it Dagnall now? I think Mazzulla might still be the youngest coach in basketball.
I think it's still Mazzulla. Bro, he was cooking DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall at Kentucky.
Yeah, where his 2 points per game at Marquette and then pulled out the 14-burger.
Let's see. Yeah, Mazzulla's younger than Dagnall.
I think Mazzulla's a good coach too, but, I trust Jason Kidd a little more. What about you?
I agree. I don't have a ton to add. I do think that Kidd is the better coach. But I also don't think it's an overwhelming advantage. All right, guys, appreciate you tuning in. As always, we will be back tomorrow with another show. We are going to have a special guest, as I mentioned. Then I think Wednesday, we're going to go on Jayson, and we're going to talk finals with him. And I also think we'll probably do a mailbag episode that day. So get your questions cooking up in your mind. Also, I will definitely have at least one more YouTube video before the finals start, probably just one. Don't hold me to anymore, but I'll try, guys. I'll try really hard to get as much content out as we possibly can. If you enjoyed, plenty more Nerd Sesh out there for you. Plenty more, an abundance of Nerd Sesh all across our YouTube channel. Video essays, full shows, check it all out. Listen to the show across audio platforms. Follow us across social media, TikTok, Instagram, at Nerd Sesh, Twitter, at Nerd_Sesh. We got trivia content there. As I mentioned last show, if you are in New York City and you want to come see the fellas in July, on July 13th, we will be at the Ainsworth doing a really fun trivia competition set up by the BDG guys. So you can buy your tickets for that, I believe, at bdg.co. You can also check out our merch at thevolume.com. You can join our Discord. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios to chat with the fellas. And with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Breber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.